Thank you for joining me in today's session on cyber incident response management in the AI world. It's my pleasure to be with you today. And my name is Tim Youngblood. I am a four-time CISO. I've been the CISO for four major brands. I'm inducted into the CISO Hall of Fame. Worked for Dell, Kimberly-Clark, McDonald's, and T-Mobile. Now I'm an angel investor. I spend time supporting boards on several boards now, and I advise several startups. But today I'm here to talk about a topic I'm very passionate about. Something that is really near and dear to my heart, and it's about the ability to respond and how to respond primarily like in a crisis, right? And what I've learned is a crisis doesn't make you, but it does reveal who you are. I want to talk a little bit about, how we get through a crisis. The reality is, as being, leaders in organizations that drive technology, particularly cybersecurity, we are shouldering one of the most responsible responsibilities in corporation, and that is maintaining trust. And it's our responsibility to, keep the trust of our customers, the trust of, the data, the trust of the systems, trust of employees, even the community to some degree. We spend a lot of time focusing in on defenses and getting our defenses right, doing defense in depth. But what about when those defenses get tested? It's that point in time when, you realize that, have you really prepared well for this? It's interesting to me when you think about your most critical resource in the midst of a crisis or an event, it's not really the technology around you, it's really time. And, those first few moments that an event occurs sets the tone for how you might recover or if you recover at all. And it's about preparedness, adaptability, and resiliency. I want to kind of talk through these topics today, kind of go through an example of an actual crisis and things that, leaders have to face, decisions that have to be made, and then, how we can leverage technology to move faster, right? So it's about time and how we drive in kind of the lessons learned around that. The reality is the way we've been sort of managing crises and incident response. There's the reality, and then there's their perception, right? And this is some stats from a recent survey that revealed some significant gaps in perception and preparedness. And it's interesting to me that there's so many expectations that senior leaders have of us versus the reality of what we can do. And you see some of these stats here. 73% say, their current response plan is technically comprehensive, but operationally flawed. 83% of boards underestimate the breach response intensity. You have 70% of teams say internal misalignment caused more chaos than the threat actor itself. And it tells us that the paradigm of creating kind of the static playbooks and the occasional practicing that we used to do just doesn't work anymore. And, we have to move forward and get to, where we are today. There was this point in time where, it was not if, but when was the cliche. And I think that's gone away now. It is really about what's happening now. And you will be evaluated on your ability to recover and not only recover, but keep the resiliency of operations so that even during an event, business continues to operate. Now, times have changed, right? We're in a different world, I think, than we were, even 3 years ago. We live in a world where checkbox crisis management doesn't work anymore. The attacks have never been so constant and even effective now. We're using AI in our enterprises, and we're getting better at getting at AI outcomes that drive efficiencies that we've never seen before. Well, the threat actors are also using AI, and they're getting more efficient and more effective. And it's changed the attack surface even. There are evolving regulatory issues that we have to deal with that needs to be integrated into how we're responding now. And so it's a new world, that we're in. And in order to move away from, the checkbox mentality, you have to build into your program some level of anticipation of an incident. you have to live in a breached mindset and start to determine how do we get to operational continuity faster. And during the crisis, you got to have the confidence that your IR frameworks are going to work well, that you've stress tested the capability across each of your processes that are associated with your response. You have to be able to learn to pivot. And this is all about, anticipation, responding, and adapting. And that's how you get to, high resiliency and be prepared for that. The truth about an incident is that it's never what we think it's going to be, right? And the things that people learn about response in the middle of an event is pretty jarring. Ask me, because I've been in some of the biggest incidents in industry. I've seen what happens, when the playbooks can start to fall apart, and you realize that you have silos, you've got broken processes, you've got gaps in communication. There are regulatory issues that you're trying to determine in real time, right? And when to disclose those things. And rarely does an event go according to some pre-made script. And these are the things we have to start to prepare for now. I want to take you through an example, a tabletop exercise for us to kind of see what this is like. So let's go through an incident scenario and talk about some of the gaps that can play out. Let me introduce you to a company called Orban. Orban Dynamics is a smart manufacturing company in Switzerland. They have recently partnered with Halcyon, who is providing some strengthened defenses on their endpoints. And like many deployments, it's taking months to realize the value of the deployment, but they are making progress. And so Halcyon is, I think, very much a typical high-tech manufacturing organization that's trying to get ahead of problems. But as we know, it's difficult to stay ahead of the threat actors. And Halcyon figures that out by waking up one morning and realizing that they have a ransomware note. And it's unfortunate news. They have an active ransomware attack, and it's impacting their CI/CD pipeline that drives their manufacturing capability. And the threat actors want $6 million in 48 hours. I think this is a pretty realistic account of what can happen with companies, right? Most people find out that they've had an incident versus discovering it on their own, right? And so this is a very true to life type event. And so Orban is trying to figure this out. And the first thing that they need to do is make sure they have the right people at the table. Those first few moments that an event then sets the tone for it all. And bringing the right parties can drive confidence, or it can deteriorate capability and seed confusion. So Orion has happened to have a pre-planned playbook, and they had the right team members, in their war room and ready to discuss, and everybody to get aligned on what the right escalation process is. And this is one of the areas where I think a lot of us tend to break down when it comes to our incident response and crisis preparedness, is not bringing all the right parties to the table. Board members need to be involved. Senior leaders all need to be involved. All business lines need to kind of understand what their role is in the event of an actual crisis, particularly a cyber crisis, particularly something like ransomware that affects everyone. Orion has really been proactive in what they did. They actually created multiple playbooks for the scenario. And it's interesting to me because I think most of us may have playbooks, but they really are designed for one variant of an issue, like one variant of a ransomware account, right? And so this is where having sort of some dynamic ability in your playbooks and having multiple sort of scenarios. So having a playbook for when a partner or a contractor has been ransomware versus a ransomware for someone that is a direct connect business partner. All these may be different, and the variance of how you respond may be different. And this is where leveraging technology to create kind of dynamic playbooks can make a big difference in either panicking or succeeding. Orion has a platform where they've put all these playbooks in They've sort of pre-planned what could happen. They looked at these scenarios, and now they're picking the right one for this triggering event. And so now that you've had the triggering event and you're moving into what would be considered triage for the event, Orion is assessing, okay, what was the point of entry? What's the radius blast? And they have full access and traceability to understand this impact, right? They need to figure out, how do we get to containment? How do we know we're in containment? And they have to be able to have that traceability. And because they've leveraged dynamic playbooks, they have pre-established TPPs to help expedite that analysis, right? And they can determine, okay, typical ransomware processes are going to occur in this data flow, and they're assessing, okay, where in my environment would I have these points of entry. This is what gets me started, and this is where AI enabled platforms are a huge time saver. And this is where Halcyon is again move forward, and they actually have a platform that's gone through and done the analysis of what's the attack path for this variant of type of ransomware, and giving the team a head start on what to do next. They've identified some more information. The threat actor has actually revealed themselves, and through the analysis and work with the third parties, they got full attribution on the threat actor. And knowing the patterns of the threat actor is a huge advantage in responding. Now you start to shape, the response itself, and you can predict what some of those next steps are based off the patterns of this type of threat actor. In this case, it's scattered spider. And you have access to the TPPs of that threat actor, and it assists you in knowing what their typical attack patterns are, so that you can get out in front of what it is that they're about to do or may have already done. And this is a really, I think, important step. Once you've kind of identified, who's attacked you and how they actually operate, you have a chance of potentially getting ahead of the issue. Anytime you're in the middle of a crisis, you're behind the eight ball on it, right? And you're struggling and running, trying to figure out, how do I get in front of this, right? And so these are the questions you've got to answer. And being able to pull some threat intel into a platform that can help you analyze that is where you've got the ability to kind of catch up to where the threat actor actually has you. Through the ransomware scenarios, there's always a pay or not pay decision, right? And they've realized this in something that definitely needs to be gamed out ahead of time. And because of the system that Avion invested in, they understand that, okay, in this scenario, I've kind of pre-planned what a negotiation might look like, and then I've also kind of assessed, what factors would tell me that I'm not going to negotiate with this director at all, right? And that maybe the impact is not as big as expected. And recall, there are people finding out about this event probably real time, right? There could be media that are about to make requests or making requests. And the ability to have kind of a platform to pull all the intel about the blast radius, the threat actor themselves, the business impact, all goes into this decision making. And again, it's really critical to have a platform, and that platform that supports some advanced analytics with AI to help you do that. One of the things that typically breaks down in the middle of a crisis is communications. In fact, it's usually the first thing. And you have to assume that the word is out. And I think in this case, they assume that the word has gotten out. People are talking about this. Some customers may have found out, and now you've got to determine, like, how will you communicate? Who will you communicate to? What needs to be in the message? Based off of that audience, and and when are you going to be in a position that is going to allow you to actually execute on that communication. I can tell you from my experience, communication is the thing that sucks up the most time in trying to craft, individual messages, PR messages, customer messages, messages to employees. So having these already pre-written I think is a huge advantage. Again, if you kind of played out kind of the scenarios, you have the ability to put the right context. And again, you can move really, really quickly. And these are the things you have to figure out, again, ahead of time. And having a platform that's already kind of played these things out could make a huge difference. In the midst of the investigation, they finally realized that they've got to the root cause, right? And it was a third party that was connecting into the environment without proper MFA. The Halcyon platform that they deployed, they expedited that deployment more and actually got more out, and that helped them discover more information about the incident itself. And of course, the knowledge of the blast radius itself, the TPP knowledge you had, the knowledge about the threat actor, all provided this guidance and helped lead and led to this kind of root cause. And now you can get to a point where you can say, okay, I do have containment of this incident, and I can move forward. And I realized that okay, in this scenario was the MFA, and we've got to get MFA out and ensure that we're protected across the board. Getting to root cause doesn't necessarily mean the incident's over. And as Orion discovered that, hey, they got a follow-up email from the threat actors saying, they were tired of waiting. And, like most crises, there's a twist of some sort. And here they're saying, I've got the data, forget about, the ransomware and encrypting your data. I've got the data and I'm going to disclose it if, you don't pay me the ransom, right? And this, again, is where you've got to be really quick and kind of analyzing what could they possibly have, right? And what's exposed. How do we go back and investigate whether what they're saying is true or not? And again, these are things where every minute counts, and it's difficult to figure out where to start. But again, if you've had a platform where you're managing this incident, you've got a much better chance of pivoting, to what the right answer should be. And in in their position, Orion did make the right decision. What they discovered was the data that they had was irrelevant, and so they did not pay the ransom. Their platform actually allowed them to block data transfers, and in this case, the information that they got was not related to production data. And so, the endpoint solution saved the day. And although word got out that they had the attack, but it was a positive message, more or less, that they determined that they did not have to pay out to hackers because of it. So again, these are kind of things that when you're in the middle of a crisis, having kind of that detailed data behind you on whether this is the threat actor's method would help you in making quick decisions there, and then also again having your technology, your endpoint detection work together with a platform that you're managing your incident response process is incredible. So what did we learn? One, preparing ahead of time is non-negotiable. I mean, you have to prepare ahead of time. You have to have the playbooks in place. You've got to know how your technology is supporting some of the playbooks you have. I think leveraging a platform to manage the response with built-in AI capability is going to drive speed for you, and speed is the most valuable asset you have. Integrating your defenses into your response capability, that's a huge advantage, and it's a part of being resilient. And this is what the executive team is expecting of us. And then just being prepared for the twist, right? In this case, there was a double extortion threat, right? But because the technology they have with the response process worked so well together, they were able to avert the wrong decision in trying to interact with the threat actor and trying to pay them. A lot of lessons learned, throughout this. There's a few key pointers in mind. I think it's critical that you have dynamic playbooks. You have to continuously run sort of simulations like this in your environment to be ready for them. You've got to identify, where you've got silos, people who are not part of your process. You've got to understand, who is responsible, who has decisions at what point. You take the ransomware. I mean, in the ransomware situation, is it, the CEO? Is it the CFO? Is it the CEO or the CISO who's going to make that decision on whether to pay a ransom or not? Those things have to be worked out way ahead of time. And these are things that you should go back to your team, talk about what are these things that we do well in this space, and then what are the things we're going to do to make us better in the future. Because the one key thing is practice, practice, practice. Cyber preparedness is a capability, and being resilient is an expectation of leadership. You have to invest in being ready for it. It's not something that just that happens with a document you create that sits on the shelf. Think beyond just the playbook and the one-time run-throughs that you may have done in the past. Include all the leadership and look for opportunities again to integrate those platforms and think about resiliency, right? Because you're going to be attacked. You are attacked right now. And so it's about like, how do I make sure I keep this business operating? And my response needs to align to that, right? And do I understand all the things that really drive revenue for this company, technology wise? And do I have the capability to ensure once we understand we've had an incident that those things keep working? So I want to thank you for the time today. We are heading into this new era together. The way we used to respond in this environment that we're in is not the way we need to respond going forward. There are no silver bullets, but we need to take intentful strategies and the risk mitigations, throughout the entire organization, and support changes that keep the company safe. And I want to appreciate everybody's time today. And you can reach me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to continue this discussion. Thank you.